What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit, and today we're going to be doing some tier list / power rankings for the halfway point of the Overwatch League season. So we're going to be doing our, I guess if you want to call it, Midseason Power Rankings. I like doing it different. The teams are so close, good or bad, that defining them with a singular number is, I don't think it's fair to the teams, because they just, in that there's such fluctuation in movement depending on metas and hero pools and all that kind of stuff, where you're nitpicking basically a monetary amount onto a team when they're actually all pretty close, pretty similar in just chunks. Like, some teams are just vastly better than other teams. Some teams are gatekeeping, but the gate is so big, especially in, NA, where you have a chunk of teams, given the right circumstances, schedule, etc., that they're going to be in tournaments or not in tournaments. The teams that are consistently in the knockouts, to me, are the best teams. And you guys know the bottom. And there's teams in these weird areas. So I did do a ranking. I have a ranking. I'll show it, towards the end. But I wanted to focus more on halfway point tier list style ranking. And I included the May Melee and the June Joust. This isn't just June Joust only. The May Melee only. This is going into the Summer Showdown, the second half of the season, what my thoughts are on these teams, where they're at the halfway point. Okay, so before we get into all of that, though, thanks for joining me, guys. All of your support's been greatly appreciated. And if you're new, thank you very much for stopping by. I do Overwatch League content 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. Last week I had a lot going on in real life. So I had one episode we did recap. I was going to do this episode a little bit earlier, but things happened. I had a birthday, I had a hangover, etc. Just going to be honest with you. Stuff like that happens. If you can hit a like, hit a subscribe, and hit that alert bell, you'll know when I have my content coming up. Let's get into this ranking thing for the June Joust. Or, I'm sorry, for the mid-season after the June Joust. So, alright guys, here you go. Here is my tier list. I'll show the rankings, my numbered rankings, after we talk about this, because this to me is more important to talk about it the way I have it here. And it's also good just for not going into into depth of what these teams are doing right and wrong. But we can do that on a week-to-week basis when we talk about their matches and stuff like that. Here you go. All right, so, starting at the bottom, the two worst teams, in my opinion, people have made some points on, maybe Vancouver's not that bad. They had a tough schedule. I still don't care. They didn't get an objective, I think, after their first, they took Hanamura, I believe, from whoever they played first in the June Joust. They didn't take a point or an objective or anything like that for the rest of the stage, so that's bad. And Valiant, the only thing they did was ruin Philadelphia, who I almost put into the C tier for that fact, but I did not. But yeah, Valiant are terrible. They're just, they mailed it in before the season started. We all know this. So there we are. D tier, not much better. I give London a little bit more credit right now than Vancouver. Guangzhou, same thing. Guangzhou is just highly disappointing. They've had coaching trauma and turnover, and there's just all kinds of things going on behind the scenes that I don't think we know that what's going on. Yeah, there's pickups that haven't worked out. There's, Kareev has been playing really well. Krong isn't playing like he did last year. There's just a whole lot of things, and it's not like APAC is God tier. I know it's hard for some of you simps to understand this. APAC is not good this year. I said it at the beginning of the season, just looking at it, that they didn't look like they were going to be great. Their problems are just too many to go into detail on. D tier, and I'm not talking about schedule coming up and who they have or any of that stuff. This is just as of at the halfway point. I keep emphasizing that because I know some people are going to say, well, why do you have Atlanta in B tier? They got into but they were absolute dog shit in the first fucking stage. The only thing they did was take this shock to 5 maps. All right, so next is a C tier. Now, I kind of call this given the right circumstances, these teams could get into a knockout round. And they have. They all have. Except for Paris, who was pretty close on the last one. We got Chengdu, the NYXL, the Defiant, the Uprising, and Paris. Of these teams, I don't know who the best is, because maybe you could argue with Chengdu, you can argue recency with New York, but they lucked into getting anything done, and they got absolutely fucking cock-knocked in the June joust. They didn't even, I don't know if they had time to breathe. The matches were so quick. They just weren't ready for it, and Toronto, they made it to knockouts, and Toronto's a weird case. I wanted to put them in D tier, but the fact that they were in the knockout rounds, they played decently enough, even though their schedule wasn't great. I put them in C. And the same goes for kind of Boston and Paris are in there too, where I wanted them to be lower. I didn't want them to be lower. I kind of thought of them being lower, but Boston has upped their game. They looked better as the years gone on. Some of the pieces and parts have gotten better, and they're playing a lot more cohesive than they did in the beginning of the season. They just have progressed slowly and nicely. I don't think they're much better than some of the other teams in this, if at all. Paris looked great in the June joust in certain situations with the metas, and they just looked like they were together. They just had a brutal schedule. They were okay to borderline bad in the beginning, but I think the two pieces that they've added in, we didn't talk too much about Vestola joining the team after Elevote left. So he looked pretty decent, and I think in that meta they looked pretty good. I thought they had a shot at making it into the knockouts at least. That maybe made a little bit of noise or something. Chengdu they're the border, I think they're the gatekeeper in this realm, in that they're good enough. They have the pieces that are good enough to make it consistently to knockout rounds, get into finals or into the final tournament things and all that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of their strategy holds them back. They keep falling back on ball. When they have guys that can play other stuff, Gaga is a great main tank. They fall in these ball comps. It's like the sins of the past keep pulling them back. And because I love some of the guys on this team. Leave is amazing. I think Gaga's amazing. Their support line is really good right now. They have great parts. It's just they can't put it together enough in certain metas. I think it's last year I equated it in the off season. They're like the smoker that has like a stash of cigarettes somewhere, that quit smoking, but when shit gets rough, they go grab them, right? That's them with the ball comp sometimes. It's all right, we're trying this other stuff. It's not working. I don't feel right. Got to go back to ball comps. It just has this vibe to me. I think on paper and potentially they are better. They could be a B tier team, but with the way they've been playing with reliance on strategies, you could say Shanghai proved that the ball comps kind of worked, but that was like an S tier. That's a godlike team. Yeah, all right. Gaga's probably in theory better than Fate on ball, but their pieces are better than Chengdu's. If you see where I'm going with that, just the overall picture. But they just sit in that zone, the Chengdu zone, I guess you can call it. But yeah, I just feel like that they're missing opportunities to have a really special year, in my opinion, by the way they're going about things. I really think that this team, given the opportunity to play what they should be, or maybe not being meta slaves, but, trying some things with Gaga and Elsa, doing some, not normal, in quotes, but I guess it's doing stuff that doesn't revolve around ball-centric comps. I think they could just do a lot better. We'll see what happens in this stage, but C tier for now with them. Okay, now let's move to the B tier. This is the biggest clusterfuck in the whole thing. Because these teams, we have the sole box of chocolates in here. We have Philly, who shit the bed in stage 2, where I said that they should be going 4-0, and they actually went 2-2. poor performance. I thought they were looking good. They got their pieces coming back, which is one of the reasons why I have them in the B tier, is that I think FD got, or Funny Astro, I always get those two mixed up. Stupid F Lucio player names. Funny Astro coming in, he was a force last year. I think that's going to make a difference. I also think potentially Poco can, because Hotbud looked good to start, and then he's just kind of Hotbud his way around it. It's not bad, it's not great. And Toby was okay. I think maybe with the influx of these guys, they're going to be really good, because you have nothing to worry about in the DPS area. Mono has been playing fine. At times, it's just certain things. You lost a map to the Valiant when you had to 3-0 them, and they didn't just lose a map; they got full held. For Christ's sake, it just was disappointing. I want them to be good. I want every team to be good, apparently, except for the Valiant, who because they shit on their players. If they stay, where they're at, I don't care. Maybe that's why I'm so angry at Philly, is they got full held by a team that I don't want to win. Sorry, Valiant fans, what they what they did to those players, and I'm nothing against the players they have on the team now, just organizationally. Yeah, so Philly, I think, has the potential to stay here or maybe move up a tier by the time we get into the final tournament, the Countdown Cup, I believe it would be. Not this one, but the one after it. They make a good showing here. They get into knockouts, potentially get to a final. I'll start believing again in Philadelphia. Then we have some other teams in here that are up and down and just, wildly inconsistent. Except for, I'm going to throw this out there, the Mayhem aren't inconsistent. They just don't have what it takes all of the time to beat some of the teams above. And that, in certain metas, that even includes Atlanta, the Justice, Houston, any team that I have like in the tier thing above them. I'm kind of disappointed in how things are going. It's just they don't have enough. I don't know what the enough is. I don't know where the problem lies, but it just seems like they can't finish certain teams. If you get teams at a certain skill level that are, theoretically above them, they lose to them. They've lost to Dallas. They've lost to the Justice. They've lost to Shanghai in the Melee playoffs. They've lost to Houston, and they lost to the Shock. You see where I'm going here. They beat your Vancouvers, London, Toronto. I believe they beat Atlanta, but I think that was in the first stage, and it was just kind of they beat the Justice in the knockouts, and the Justice had a bad game. I don't know what happened to them in that game. The Mayhem had their number in that one. They're just in this weird spot. You want to pinpoint, everyone wants to turn the screws on Oj. He's actually the least of the problems. It's just, they make bad plays at the wrong time. Somebody misses a shot. Somebody Qs at the wrong time. They hits Q. They don't switch fast enough. They're too aggressive, and then they're not aggressive enough. There's just some of these nuances with the Mayhem. The players are, if you look at that roster, they shouldn't be where they're at. They should be, in my estimation, maybe it's because of the fanboy in me, I think they should be in A tier and competing more than having a better record than they do. I thought the last meta would be pretty decent for them. I was a little concerned about, Aristocomps being big, but they oddly were not as good with the Winston. And strangely enough, they did better with the Rhine comps than they're doing with the faster paced Winston stuff. And it did not work out in the last stage. And there are just times like even they beat London, but London gave them a battle through most of that match in stage one. They're just weird. Some of the other teams we have in there, the Justice, I don't know what to think of the Justice. I know when Decay's in there, they're a fucking animal team, and they will kill anybody. But the problem is they didn't play him in the first two matches in this stage. I don't know why. They thought Jerry was better. And Mag he's a rookie, so there's some inconsistencies. I think there's some a little bit of synergistic issues with Fury that they're working through, and things are getting better with that. Their support line hasn't been the biggest problem. I just think that when they're in certain metas, they're just not They're not cohesive. They're just like kind of feeling each other out still. But I still think they're a really, really good team. Decay needs to be in there every minute of every game, regardless of what, unless is sick or injured or something like that. They have to play him all the time. I know people want Jerry in there. They think he's a better... Fucking Decay is one of the best DPS players in the league. So why sit him? I mean... Yeah, Philly did that last year a couple times with Hisu and Carpe, but a lot of that was like doing stuff with Sombra and things that Carpe necessarily isn't known for, and then having to play him on Widowmaker in situations on those maps. You know, if you switched out or whatever, or he starts on Widow and switches to, like if you're on Junkertown, you start off Widow, and then eventually you go into like a Sombra or something like that. But that's beside the point. What I'm getting at is I don't know why you would take him out. I understand you have these guys, and they have some sort of, in your mind, you have a specific need for them. For me, the need is Decay all the time, period. If that dude is in the right space, even when he wasn't in Dallas, when he was playing, he still was carrying. The dude is like, he's on that Fleta, Prophet, Carpe level of DPS player. He needs to be in all the time. But to me, they're on the edge of the BA tier, depending on who they decide to play. And Atlanta falls in there too, for me. Atlanta, when they have the metas in their favor and things are set for them to, you know, where they're comfortable, they're fantastic. If you get them out of their comfort zone, i.e. Monkey, which they've improved a lot on playing Winston comps. That's why right now I have them in B, but not in A. They also had a kind of a crap first stage, and you know, it felt at times like they were just tilted in the first stage. They got it together though, and they made a fantastic showing. They were hammering everybody, and you know, they ran into the Dragons. It is what it is. But I mean, Dallas lost to them too. So I mean, what are you going to expect? So now the last two teams we have on here are APAC. Teams that I kind of feel are in the same realm, except for I think Hangzhou is on the uptick. Yeah, they lost to New York. That was a freaking terrible loss. They were doing weird stuff with comps in that. I don't know why. They should have won that. I think they were kind of just thinking they were going to beat them, and I think they tried some different comps, and it screwed them in the end. But I think they're on the up and up. As long as, you know, Shy is fantastic. He's made a huge difference. You got Gushue playing at a high level again. MCD's playing really well. They got a lot of guys playing just fantastic on this team, and I think this is a first for me. I see them on the up and up. I'm keeping them in the B tier, though, because APAC is just weird, and it's hard to evaluate, because every stage you're playing potentially two mediocre to bad teams, right? I mean, Guangzhou, Valiant, they should be wins for a team like Hangzhou. New York should be a win for a team like Hangzhou as well. But, you know, and they can beat Chengdu, but, you know, it's hard to say. As long as Shy is in there and they continue to play him, I think they're fine. But that's my opinion on them. I think they're on the uptick in APAC. I don't think they're going to catch the Dragons in any way, shape, or form. But I think they're on level or slightly better than Seoul, Chengdu, New York. So I think they're kind of in the same... Not in the same realm, but sort of. The final team we talk about, Seoul. I'm not buying Seoul. They're like, if you guys are NFL fans, oddly enough, same logo. They're the Bengals of like the 2010 to 2018. They rack up 10, 12 wins. They look decent enough. They're a quote unquote playoff caliber team. They get in the playoffs and then they get their fucking teeth kicked in. That's what's happening with Seoul. All they rely on is, please, for the love of God, Prophet and Fitz, please go off, because that's the only way they win. And if they get neutralized, they're fucked. Their support line is kind of meh. And I'm being nice. They're of the pieces of this team, they're probably the worst pieces. 2U has been playing really well at the off tank, and Gesture's doing whatever Gesture does. He's okay, but I feel like there's so much you have to reel in with him, and it's like you have to wrangle him into like playing with the team. And sometimes he gets that it's still 2018. I'm just going to go mind fuck everybody on Winston because nobody's playing it at my level. I think he still thinks he can do that, and it's not working in certain situations. And then you add in some of the strange stuff they do with comps and things like that, and it's just meh. But they're still good enough, and I believe they're 6-2. But they just don't have what it takes to get to past Shanghai or potentially, in my opinion, in a playoff scenario, a Philly or Hangzhou. I don't think that it's in the cards for them. Yeah, all right, you can make the argument that they did this time, but I'm not buying into Seoul this year. I bought into them in the past. I've said this in the past at the halfway point last year. I said, I don't know what the fuck this team is. They're weird. They're never going to win anything. They're not going to get into they're lucky that there's all 20 teams are in the playoffs because they wouldn't have gotten in. I went on one of those rants and, they made it to the finals and made a match out of it. So who knows? We could be seeing the same scenario from them. But that's the B tier. It's a big mess. And there are teams on the border on either side of that. The one team that I think that's solidly in there is the Mayhem. Justice and Reign could be jumped to A tier, and I think potentially a Seoul or a Philly could go either way. And actually, we can throw the Spark in here as a solid, with potential to move up, but to be one step below Shanghai. A tier, San Francisco Gladiators and the Houston Outlaws. I have Houston in here because you could make the schedule argument all you want. They've lost 2 games. They look decent on everything until they get to the playoffs. See Seoul Dynasty. I just think they're a little bit better of a team than Seoul is right now on the whole. I don't think the June Joust metas were the best for them, but they went through and they got into the knockouts and they did what they had to do. I just think that, on the whole, they are close to being at the level of San Francisco, the Gladiators, who are here. They were a border team for me. I put them up here for just the performance they had in the last. You go cumulative. They've looked better since week 2 of the season, and they've progressed into this. But back to Houston. I like what Houston's doing. I like where they're at. I just think sometimes great minds make bad decisions. And I think that's what happens with their coaching staff sometimes. They go in, they don't have a backup plan. We're going in with this plan, and if it doesn't work, well, we're fucked, and they lose. Whereas you look at teams like, I feel like teams like Dallas, even San Francisco, Shanghai, they have the adaptability on the fly kind of vibes with the coaching staff where they're like, all right, you know what? Remember when we tried this, let's try going up and doing this other strategy that we worked on a little bit. This is going to work out better. It doesn't feel like the Outlaws have that. When something doesn't work, they lose. Whether someone figures them out or it's just a garbage comp to start with, because the players are good. I am fully confident in this team. I think that they're a decent team. I'm not going to waver on that unless they have a bad stage, and they just start falling apart, which I don't think they're going to do. But I just think there's some things they got to work on outside of the team. Now, I don't know what to think, though, of one thing, like the Dreamer Edition. Okay, maybe you make the argument it was more for this meta, the last one in the June Joust. But I want Jengu on Reinhardt if you're running Reinhardt. And I don't know if there's just been an overall feel of, we'll see this week with whether or not Reinhardt's going to be viable or not. But I do like Houston's chances. I think they can get through, break through, win a knockout round game, and potentially go into, a tournament to Hawaii. The Gladiators. Now, I was down on them in the first stage for reasons. They looked absolutely terrible. They did not look like the team that they are, or they should be. And you can make the argument kind of in this one, but Dallas beat them. They played Dallas harder than anyone did besides Shanghai. They had good ideas on the comps. They're, getting their cohesiveness down. I think they're solidly A tier. They need a little bit more consistency. As much as I like Kevster out of him, like when he's playing the Echo and things like that, they need a little bit more of that. Because Birdring is your carry most of the time, but Kevster has his moments where he can be. If both of them are, when both of those guys play at the level we expect them to play, the Gladiators are pretty much unstoppable. And the same thing goes for Space, Shu, Moth, and Muse is looking pretty good too. But like when Shu and Moth are on their game, like playing at the high level, like in some of the matches they were doing where they went 4-0 in June, they're hard to beat because nobody's dying and they're making key plays, on whatever hero, whether it's building convalescence really fast with Moira or Moth playing Lucio with Boops and, engages with the speed boosts and all that kind of stuff. However they are working, those two guys, when they're on the page and they're clicking, the Gladiators are really hard to beat. Weakest part of this team, in theory, to me, is the tank line, but that's not bad. I mean, it's not saying that they're bad, but I think this is the one. Sometimes when they get into problems, I think it's just Muse being inexperienced. I think Space is fine. He's been I've gotten my confidence back in Space watching him. He's had a couple. Everybody has moments where they're kind of meh, or they make big mistakes, especially in these reliant metas with alt timings and all that stuff, like this kind of goatee bullshit. But yeah, I think they're solidly an A-tier team. I mean, you can make arguments against or for, but I like them in this spot. Now, depending on what they do in this June joust, they could drop down to B. I don't think they're moving up to S. I think that's right now is unreachable for a lot of teams. Now, the last team I put in here is probably controversial to some of you guys. Now, it's weird for me to say that I think the Shock are a border team on A and B. Now, they're 7-1. But the problem is they're losing games in playoff situations where they didn't before. And they're not just losing, they're getting waxed. So I think overall they are still an elite team. A-tier team. I just think in certain situations they're not looking as good. And a lot of that has to do with the level of the competition. Like I always say with the Shock. They're not the lone wolf anymore. They're not all right, guys, we're on top of the mountain. You're 4 miles down. Try and get to us. This year, people are pretty close to the top of the mountain, if not pushing them off the top, which has been the case. And they're not as good as some of the teams. So therefore, you're getting playoff losses, which is kind of baffling to me. Just given at the level of how these guys play and the coaching. And there's a lot of factors that I think that are coming into play where they're not being able to assert their dominance like they once were. And I think some of it too is the staff has, been depleted from San Francisco. It happens when you have a great coach and great assistants. People are going to poach all of your talent. But I think San Francisco has a good to, superior team than 90% of the league. It's just in certain moments they're failing where they haven't failed in 2+ years. I can't really find there's some flaws here and there. I think FD God's aggression is a little weird for them. I don't think they're used to playing with that. They're used to playing with calculated Moth, and not that either one are. Not that Moth is that much superior to him, but I think it's just a different play style they're not used to. I like their DPS rotation. I think they got it down. Glister has been proving himself. I think after a shaky start, I think he's fine. And with Striker and Nero, I think they got all the bases that they need to covered. If you're running straight up hit scan, yeah, okay, so you're telegraphing a little bit. If you're running straight up long range hit scan, you're gonna see a lot of Glister. If you're running your Ashes, your Widowmakers, even Hanzo. Potentially. I mean, you might want Nero to play that, but still, if you're running like an Echo Hanzo or something like that, I would have him in there over Striker. But everything else is Striker. Tracer, Reaper, McCree, the folks you're going to run alongside of whatever Nero's going to do. But I think they're fine. I think they should be doing the same thing. Again, this stage, 3-1, 4-0. They just need to win a playoff game to make me feel as though they're back to where they were. Now, obviously, the top two teams, S tier, Dallas and Shanghai, both fantastic. Adaptability, and we had they're both final winners in the tournaments. Dallas, it takes a minute to get rolling in a meta, but once they do, they're unstoppable. Once you get them to their generally to their second week in a meta, they're just better than everybody else. It's just the way it is. And I feel as though Shanghai is far and away better than any team in APAC. They might lose a game, sure, everybody does. But when the money's on the table, nobody's beating this team in APAC to knock them out of a tournament. I don't think. The two teams with potential to do that, to me, are Philly and Seoul, oddly enough. But I don't necessarily see it. I mean, it could happen, but I mean, who knows? Chengdu could come and beat them, whatever. But both of these teams have just adapted, and especially Dallas. Dallas has shown time and time again this season that the meta doesn't necessarily have to matter to them. They play what they're good at, and they're going to wreck you. And for three quarters, the first half of that match against Shanghai, they were dominating them. And the rest of the match was a dogfight for Shanghai to dig out of that hole and win. I mean, Shanghai went down 3-1, and then they won 3 maps in a row. What are you going to say? They beat Dallas. So, I mean, numbers-wise, you could stick them there. But, yeah, this is how I have these teams grouped. And I don't really have to talk about Dallas and Shanghai as, that much more. We know how great these two teams are. I love watching them play. I love watching them play each other. Not only are they both the top two teams in the league, now we have a rivalry between Dallas and Shanghai, which is fantastic. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that shock Vancouver Titans thing that was going on 2 years ago. It gives me those vibes like that, and I love that. There's two good teams battling it out, and we've split the difference so far, first half of the year. I do think that Dallas has made adaptations without a hit scan, and I don't know if XE was there if they would have been this good. I'm going to flat out say it. I think they have their 6, and Pine is great to have around, and they have Repel. I just think they keep these guys in, and they stopped experimenting with Fielder, Repel, and they just kind of run Fielder all the time now, and I think that's fine. They look so much better since they do that. They've been doing that. I got to keep them here. They made a joke out of the brackets, them and Shanghai. We talked about it on the recap. I think there was 2 maps won by losing teams in all the playoff type scenario games. That's just terrible. But yeah, that's the rankings. All right, so real quick, we'll throw up the numbers, and here you go. Here's how I have them numbered. So I know people like that. I do have Houston up fairly high. I actually saved it before. I wanted to have the Gladiators ahead of them. But, what are you going to do? And this is just straight up. There were tier breaks in there I forgot to take out from the last time. Oops. The only tier break that's necessary is the one at the bottom and the one at the top. The other ones in the middle are just kind of whatever. But yeah, Shanghai won, Dallas, San Francisco. It should be Gladiators, Houston, Washington, Atlanta, Hangzhou, Florida, Seoul, Philly. Philly, I'm just mad at you because you lost a map to the Valiant. That's why you're down that low. Do your job this time. Then next I got Boston, Chengdu, Paris, Toronto. Toronto, I'm kind of weird on. I didn't really talk about them much, but real quick, Toronto, I just don't feel they're as good as they're on the same level as these teams. And, I could have had New York up one higher, but I just felt like Toronto maybe had a quality win and New York really hasn't. I don't know. I guess New York had one quality win. I don't know. They're kind of on the same level. Toronto is just kind of weird in a weird spot, weird space. I don't understand what's going on with them. But, yeah, so there you go. There's that. And then one last one before we call it a day. Here's how I have the splits. They're in the right order this time. And this time I did split them the way I wanted to. Yeah, I have Toronto and Paris flipped. Okay, maybe I don't have them the way. Jesus Christ, I'm terrible with that thing. I should just do it on my own with my own stuff. I'm just going to start doing that. I used to do that, but I figured this is easier. I can just move the things around, and I forget to move things when I'm moving other things, and you know how that goes. But there you go. There's my power rankings for the midpoint of the season. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks a lot for joining. Thanks a lot for all of your feedback and stuff. I'm trying to get some better quality things. I do listen to what you guys have to say when you give me advice, and I appreciate it greatly. It helps me out, and it helps me, bring better content to you guys too. But I'm working on some things. One of the things that I liked doing, and I tried it, but the problem is the way the schedule is I really like doing, like, picking a game and going and looking at big plays and stuff like that from the replay viewer. But the damn replay viewer, by the time it goes up on Tuesday night, it's or Monday night, it gets into it's too late for me. I wish they kind of had the games go up a little bit earlier, but right now it's what we got, and I'm trying to work on some other things where I make some relevant content when I'm talking about things, so you guys can see what I'm seeing, sort of. Diving into, all right, this is going on, and this is what I'm talking about, and why this guy did this, or whatever. Why Guangzhou looks like trash, or why the Shocker good. You know what I mean in that. But anyway, I appreciate all of your suggestions and help. I really do. Thank you very much. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it. Like I said, thanks for joining. All you new guys, thank you very much for stopping by. It's greatly appreciated. This is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody stay safe, have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.